The oil rig stood tall in the middle of the vast and foreboding ocean, a beacon of light and hope in an otherwise dark and desolate landscape. Its steel framework stretched high into the sky, towering over the water. A monolith of technology, the rig was a marvel of human engineering, a testament to the ingenuity of those who built it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the rig transformed into a ghostly presence. From the watery surface, the rig loomed like a giant, its bright lights piercing through the darkness, making surrounding waters glow. The waves crashed against steel walls, sending sprays of salt water high into the air. The sound of howling wind and waves echoed across the rig as an otherworldly soundtrack spreading unease. The bright lights of the rig casted eerie shadows across the metal walls and machinery. The incessant hum of the generators and engines created a constant background noise that seemed to reverberate through the rig, filling the workers with a sense of foreboding. The smell of oil and metal hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of dangers that lay beneath. Infrastructural horror is a genre Mark Cinkevich and I coined to encapsulate the deep-seated dread lurking within extractivist infrastructures. Unlike horror genres which rely heavily on shock value, infrastructural horror operates through suspense. It focuses on revealing the foreboding in the architecture of dispossession and destruction, creating discomfort and repulsion. The suspense in infrastructural horror can take generations, slowly poisoning those in proximity to the structures, and span over distances whose true dimensions can be entirely grasped. This genre hinges on the enormity of infrastructure and the violence it allows for, the sublime. Colonial infrastructure aims to contain the horrors of extraction and conceal, wash, and filter them out for those who use it. The appearance of the structures changes depending on where you are looking from. Infrastructural horror, therefore, does not invent, but amplifies what is already felt and seen by those in proximity. A comparison between oil and blood, for instance, seems to be a metaphor only for those who never felt the consequences of its extraction. In the realm of horror, architecture plays an evocative role, shaping the ambience and manipulating the viewer's state. It is the physical setting in which fear unfolds and suspense builds. Architecture, with its ability to define space, limit visibility, and control movement, can evoke a sense of dread, vulnerability, and disorientation. Structure like labyrinthine corridors, deserted interrogation rooms, or towering energy infrastructures act as foreboding spaces, harboring threats impossible to fully comprehend. The built environment's monumental scale, a key obsession of any authoritarian regime, conveys an oppressive sense devoid of agency. Hence, architecture serves as a silent protagonist in the narrative of horror, encapsulating the fear of the viewer. 3 years ago, Mark and I started working on the invasive infrastructures with the usual suspect, the Russian energy structure. Its pipes are sprawling to keep hostage countries enmeshed in the grid of dependence. It tightens the grip every year, toggling with power at the source. Russia enforces more than energy dependence, energy servility. Internal organs shift in secret, rerouting energy flows and changing the country's constitution. Power lines were fouled or diverted, turning the country into prey.
Darkness clotted around the infected mass. It swept through the city as a rolling blackout, spreading to nearby houses, hospitals, and schools. The demons themselves were drawn to the glow of normal life, places rich with subjects to destroy or deceive. The ritual of devastation would begin. First, warplanes would vomit a deep shadow that concealed the advancing archdemons. Then, the rest would follow, drawn to the dark mass like flies to a corpse. The demons swarmed the hospitals, then lay in wait to prey on those who came to the rescue. The swarm spread through the schools, filled homes with rotten darkness. It dreamt of total shadow. Civilian normalcy disappeared with the light. The throes of the possessed, the bleeding and convulsions that racked its body, drained it of vitality. For a time, its arteries were blocked. The blood that pumped through its veins grew still. But even as the demons gathered strength, hoarding resources and siphoning energy away from the living, they could not allow their host to die. They kept the country in a state of undeath, reanimating its infrastructure to circulate food, fuel, and energy. The body awoke to find its senses depleted, its will to live muffled by a singular, powerful hunger. It was only alive, inasmuch as it was driven to relieve its possessor's insatiable appetite.
In medieval times, possession was seen as embodiment material. A demon was believed to reside in a specific part of the body, usually the spine or the nervous system. A demon would be exorcised through connection to that organ. This suggests that the demonic entity, despite being immaterial, becomes entwined with the body it possesses. The physical connection between demonic force and the body it harvests holds true for how the Russian army is connected to the countries it aims to destroy. Their relationship mirrored the physical parasitic bond between a demonic entity and its host. This connection, revealing the Russian army vulnerability, became the focal point of our work. About 10 o'clock, I go up to my room. As soon as I have entered, I lock and bolt the door. I am frightened. Of what? Up till the present time, I have been frightened of nothing. I open my cupboards and look under the bed. I listen. I listen to what? How strange it is that a simple feeling of discomfort, of impeded or heightened circulation, perhaps the irritation of a nervous center, a slight congestion, a small disturbance in the imperfect and delicate functions of our living machinery can turn the most light-hearted of men into a melancholy one, and make a coward of the bravest. Then I go to bed, and I wait for sleep as a man might wait for the executioner. I wait for its coming with dread, and my heart beats and my legs tremble while my whole body shivers beneath the warmth of the bedclothes until the moment when I suddenly fall asleep as a man throws himself into a pool of stagnant water, in order to drown. I do not feel this perfidious sleep coming over me as I used to, but a sleep which is close to me and watching me, which is going to seize me by the head, to close my eyes and annihilate me. I sleep a long time, 2 or 3 hours perhaps. Then a dream, no, a nightmare lays hold on me. I feel that I am in bed and asleep. I feel it and I know it. And I feel also that somebody is coming close to me, is looking at me, touching me, is getting onto my bed, is kneeling on my chest, is taking my neck between his hands and squeezing it with all his might in order to strangle me. I struggle, bound by the terrible powerlessness which paralyzes us in our dreams. I try to cry out, but I cannot. I want to move, I cannot. I try with the most violent efforts and out of breath to turn over and throw off this being which is crushing and suffocating me.
You wake up with a start. You're in your room. It's dark. You reach over to turn on the light. Was it all just a bad dream? Flipping the switch makes no difference. Nightmare and reality have become one and the same. You turn to the open window for air and notice how apparent the feeding is at night. The airport has remained luminous long after sunset, piercing through the deep gloom that has been forced over the entire country. The glow, hypnotic and dim, is protected by a braid of cords grown to grotesque proportions. These make up an umbilical cord, swollen with the energy that feeds into the airport. The cables bonding host and demon are carefully concealed yet detectable on the ground. The energy they transmit is volatile, so they cannot stretch far. In fact, you can reach the source on foot. You leave the house and walk, not towards the airport, but away from it, using the great tangle of wires as a navigational guide. Be aware of where you came from and where you are going to. Do not make any noise. Listen to the pulsating hum deep within the wires. Find the rhythm and directions in which it drains and sustains the host. You will find yourself entering territory that exists only as a gray zone on the map. You will have to remember every step you take deeper into the zone, because nothing else will guide your return. If you are traveling at night, a hostile metallic buzz will alert you to the fact that you are approaching the source. At dusk or sunrise, it will be the sudden sight of shadows, long and sinister, that will signal that you've arrived. From a short distance, the structure looks familiar. An everyday power plant, not unlike the one installed in a neglected quadrant of your town. Still, it doesn't quite match up to its surroundings. It is not out of place, but rather out of proportion. It has grown so much that it has become uncanny, unrecognizable. The monstrous thing before you smells of ozone. Your head is heavy, and the air is so charged it's hard to take a breath. Your thoughts materialize as blurs, fragmented and deformed.
This excerpt is from the film on set Mark and I made earlier this year, which explores the horror of the Russian invasion by looking into the life cycle of its core element, a military base. The film locates the viewer within an unsettling CGI environment reconstructed from satellite images of the air bases of Wymin in Syria, Baranovich in Belarus, and Milbek in Ukraine. By following their signs of deployment to their later devastation and consumption of foreign countries, the film introduces an unexpected point of view, one of parasite that emerges to destroy the sovereign states from within. In every instance, we discuss the onset of an invasion closely resembles a sinister disease. They spread within the country, annihilating its crucial infrastructure and weaponizing what is left. This structure is once pillars of a functioning society and repurposed as stream of warfare, aiding the invaders' advance. A cruel irony surfaces. The sovereign state turns against itself, its civilian functions replaced with militaristic objectives. Upon successfully infiltrating the territory, the invading force engages in a superficial restoration of the demolished infrastructure. Their efforts, unsurprisingly, are half-hearted, restricted to what's needed to protect the invasion, and dismissive of the inhabitants living under the tyrannical rule. The political landscape of the occupied territories morph into a state of undeath, obsolete political entities kept alive artificially by the Russian invaders. Russia hunts for revolutionary changes. Once a democratic revolution happens, it is ready to strike. Take the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Once overthrown by the Syrian revolution, he is now kept in power through the machinations of the Russian troops. A similar narrative played out in Ukraine when Russia seized control over the Crimean Peninsula in eastern Ukraine, cementing its hold over the territories meant to be liberated by the Revolution of Dignity. In Belarus, the Russian occupation ensured the survival of Lukashenko's regime amidst a countrywide revolution. Yet, this political structure is already teetering on the brink of death, only persists due to Russia's interference. If one were to decimate the sprawling structures of Russian occupation, the frailty of these political cadavers becomes glaringly obvious. They are barely clinging to existence, overshadowed by the robust life force ready to assume control at a moment's notice, as was intended prior to the invasions.
In 2015, the shadows appeared at the airport in Syria. The airport's previously healthy body, with its steady circulation of goods and equipment, suddenly succumbed to an infectious curse. Its belly, already full of crates and vehicles, began to swell to enormous proportions. Spaces meant for civilians were filled with weaponry, stuffed with military equipment, cables, and pipes, until one morning brought relief in the form of destruction. Screaming filled the air, and a giant distended bomber cut across the sky. Under the heavy aeroplane, the bloated airport burst. It started vomiting broken pieces of iron, cluster munitions, steel needles, white phosphorus, and shards of glass. This mass, disgorged from the planes, rapidly spread the infestation. It tasted like metal and smelled like burning flesh.